Hello, everybody. My name is Benjamin Day,
And I am Jillian Mason.
and this is Medicare for All, the podcast for everybody who needs healthcare. And I would
Mhm.
add healthcare that has not been privatized and ruins your access to
Heyo.
healthcare, which has absolutely nothing about what we're going to talk about today. No, today we are talking about the Battle of the Letters.
Because we never talk about that. We never talk about the
No,
need for public
no.
health care on this
Why?
podcast.
Well,
Why
let's
mention it?
let's talk about sports, Jillian, your favorite topic.
All right, sounds
Any
great.
sports, really. So we're going to talk about the Battle of the Letters today. What
Mm.
does that mean? Well, aside from the occasional fist fight or threat of it, most of our legislators do make the choice to use their words when they're angry. Good on
Oh.
them. And oddly enough, a lot of those words go into public letters that legislators publish and write to the president or to various administration officials or even to each other, the which is called the Dear Colleague letter.
Mm-hmm.
But Jillian, as you had to remind me, basically no one in the United States has written or read a proper letter in decades.
That's right.
So despite all that, the public comment letter is still very popular and alive and well in Congress. And they have elevated this very obscure literary genre to a competitive sport, using letters to demonstrate how much power and support they have to build alliances and to shape policy. It's still kind of an important thing we have to deal with in politics, which is weird.
It
So,
is weird.
we are going to talk about an ongoing battle of letters on one of our favorite topics, which is the privatization of Medicare through a program
Mm.
known as Medicare Advantage. So, we're going to talk about, cover all the players in the debate and how they're engaging in this battle and how it could impact our access to healthcare. Whether you have Medicare now or you're going to need it eventually, this is important. So, Jillian, for folks who haven't been listening religiously to our back catalog of episodes, which I'm very upset if you're not.
Shame on you. Shame on you.
We covered Medicare Advantage very clearly in detailed fashion back in 2022.
And yet
So,
it did not change the world.
yeah, I really think everyone should have it top of mind.
Why are we still talking about this?
Maybe we should just do the 101. Like, what is Medicare Advantage?
Yeah,
Before we dip into the current fight that's happening right now in Congress.
All right. Okay. All right. So I'll do the Medicare Advantage 101
for dummies.
For dummies. And honestly, you actually have to be pretty smart to understand this, unfortunately, which
like
is
all healthcare.
What they're
the whole fucking
on.
Healthcare system.
Oh man. So yeah, our healthcare system should be designed for dummies. I want to just say that. I think that's like a good thing. It should be designed for dummies. We should, it doesn't matter what your ability is. You should be able to understand your healthcare plan. Anyway. All right. So basically Medicare Advantage got created, right, as this like for-profit, private alternative to what we call traditional or public Medicare, right? And the promise there was lower costs, but it actually didn't happen.
You mean the marketplace didn't lower our costs?
God,
I thought that's how it works.
Yet again, Ben, this will surprise you. But Medicare Advantage plans, because they're run through private insurers, are actually far more expensive to taxpayers than traditional Medicare for covering the exact same person. Right. So this costs taxpayers $7 billion more per year than if everyone was just covered by traditional Medicare.
Wait, was that billion? 7 billion?
7 billion with a B. A B is in Ben.
That
yes.
all. I guess we could do a few things with that extra money. It's being
skimmed
off the top.
I mean, like, yeah, I would kill for a new pair of shoes at this point, so like $7 billion feels like there's a lot you could do with that.
You could have a lot
Everybody could have shoes. Everybody could have shoes. So you guys, you might not recognize the term Medicare Advantage, but you will recognize these plans, right? This is the healthcare that Joe Namath and Jimmy J.J. Walker of Dynamite fame, and even Big Papi, sorry Ben, big Red Sox fan, they're selling this to seniors, right? They're commercials everywhere on TV, and they make these huge promises, right, that they're going to give coverage for vision and dental care, transportation, groceries. Some of them even suggest that you'll get a stipend,
Mhm.
all of that for $0 premiums, so $0 a month, right, or for really low cost premiums.
For the
So
low cost of
for the but it turns out for the low cost of your health.
oh, no.
So basically what these private companies are doing is they're draining public money, right? So they're taking money out of the Medicare system to provide this basically substandard insurance,
Right.
generally substandard insurance, right? And I think like we need to always keep mentioning, right, that these companies are actually exploiting a legitimate problem in Medicare, right? Which is that many seniors are actually forced. Medicare Part A, right, will cover your hospital care and your doctors, but many seniors are actually forced to pay premiums for Medigap plans, which cover, like stuff like chewing and seeing, you know.
Why would that
So
not be covered?
as we've I think what was one of our comrades from the DSA, I think, described teeth as luxury mouth bones.
Right.
um, so
Mhm.
I mean, so dental coverage, vision coverage, that kind of
Right.
thing,
All of which is not included at all in traditional Medicare. Um,
right,
and then there's
despite our
all
best efforts.
yeah, and there's also premiums and deductibles and things can pile up. So
All that
yep.
shit, right?
Mhm.
So basically, if you can't afford the premiums for the Medicap coverage, but you need to like chew or see, right? You're forced to you might be forced into a Medicare Advantage plan just because that's what you can afford month to month, right?
Mhm.
And it could be fine until it isn't, right?
Mhm.
Until you need care and you find out that the copays and the deductibles are too high, there are super limited networks, or that the insurance company refuses to pre-authorize your treatment, which is a huge issue with Medicare Advantage plans. We'll
Get to
talk a
that
little bit
more.
more about that later. No spoilers. We're talking about pre-authorization. But I mean, long story short, these Medicare Advantage plans, most of them don't actually come through on their promises, no matter how genuine Jimmy JJ Walker seems when he promises them. And in actuality, seniors are actually ended up being pushed out of Medicare Advantage and back into traditional Medicare when they're sick and they actually need care, right? Because if you get sick and you can't afford the copays, or you can't actually afford the care, or the company can just make things such a hassle for you that you no longer want to be on a Medicare Advantage plan. And fewer doctors are taking them because of the problems inherent in the system. So basically, they take you in when they're making money off of you because they like collecting money. Private insurers do, but they actually hate paying money for the services they're supposed to provide. Go figure.
Yeah, they sound a lot like everything we're familiar with private insurance companies, not Medicare, right?
I mean, yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty much the same shit, right? Same shit, different episode.
Yeah.
But if you're interested in learning more about this and kind of the complications and all of the bullshit, we actually did a really good report on it called "Taking Advantage" about Medicare Advantage, where we interviewed people, and what we found out was where we solicited stories from our supporters, and they sent us stories about their experiences with Medicare Advantage. And what we found out is that for the most part, people had the experience that it was good until it wasn't, right? It was good until they had a kind of catastrophic health crisis. And frankly, isn't that what insurance is for? The moment you do have a catastrophic health crisis.
Right.
Anyway. Oh, so I mean, given all of that, right? Complicated, complex issue. We want to talk a little bit about who's for Medicare Advantage and who's against it, as we say in Texas.
Yeah, and I think the answer is different in Congress, as most things are, as opposed to at the grassroots level. And like you were saying, from the report we did and from surveying our own members, some people do like their Medicare Advantage plans. And in our experience of asking people and doing follow-up, it's usually people who don't have very extensive healthcare needs,
Hmm.
because you're usually paying less upfront for those Medicare Advantage plans, and the real trouble comes when you have really significant healthcare needs and you need to be going to the doctors a lot, need to be seeing a lot of specialists, need to be getting into the hospital, and seeing particular specialists who will meet your needs. That's when Medicare Advantage plans make your life hell. But again, for a lot of people, it's all they can afford on their income.
Right.
So they don't want to lose the Medicare Advantage option if the only other alternative is too expensive for them.
Hmm.
And if you are one of these folks who qualifies, or if you're a senior, if you have a disability, but you don't have crazy healthcare needs, then it might work for you right up until you need significant healthcare needs, which is very risky. So
We don't sell insurance, even public insurance.
no.
So we definitely would never feel like we could tell you what's best for your health.
Right,
So if
exactly.
you're thinking about Medicare Advantage plan, that's what you can afford. Here are some caveats about the policy, but honestly, we're not making any statements about what's actually better for your health.
That's exactly right.
Or
Healthcare Now, we have Healthcare Now board members on Medicare Advantage plans, and on traditional Medicare, we make no value judgments about individuals, about what they choose. You just kind of have to choose what you can afford and what's best for you in
Yeah.
your particular circumstance in your particular part of the country. But having said that, there's no question that Medicare Advantage is kind of a lower tier of insurance coverage than
Hmm.
if you can afford public Medicare plus a good Medigap plan. And in fact, overwhelmingly, it's lower income people and communities of color that are being enrolled in the Medicare Advantage plans. And these companies are making a lot of money off of those vulnerable populations, and sometimes tricking them into decisions that might not be best for them through really aggressive marketing and advertising.
Yeah.
So the politics of Medicare Advantage in Congress are also very complicated, though, I think because of all the same reasons we just talked about.
Hmm.
So historically, right up until the last year or two, there was a lot of support for Medicare Advantage plans, just like blanket support on both sides of the aisle from both Democrats and Republicans. It's not like one of these issues where there's a clean, like, progressive support this and conservative support that. In fact, there were a lot of people members of Congress who support Medicare Advantage who also support Medicare for all, which I don't know quite how you square that circle, but I think it was probably coming from their constituents who are on Medicare Advantage plans and were afraid of losing what
Yeah.
they have or being forced into something more expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. And when they say that, they can, because the Medicare Advantage program pretends to address this problem that is a legit problem with Medicare, right?
Right.
It gives them this cover, like, oh, I'm fixing their problems.
Right. And it's funny, you'll hear from both sides. The insurance companies will brag that they are treating people of color and low income people, and that they're an amazing thing, that they're doing basically a service to the community. And the rest of us critics know that they're kind of taking advantage of these communities and providing far
Yeah.
substandard coverage to those vulnerable communities. So, Jillian, let's get to these battling letters.
Yes.
And we should start with the bad guys first, because we're natural pessimists and cynics. So
They started
or
it.
we can end on a high note. Let's frame it that way.
All right, let's do that. I still argue that they started it by trying to take away our Medicare. Just saying.
Accurate.
But so the group that's really like the real bad guys here, right?
Mhm.
Are actually the AHIP. I said AHIP.
It doesn't translate well as an acronym, does it?
You know what's really funny about it is that it actually used to be called America's Health Insurance Providers, but now they exclusively go by AHIP, as if that were a word. I think that they found out that health insurance is actually a toxic term for consumers.
Pay
But
no attention to that man behind the curtain.
AHIP
That health insurer behind the curtain. We are just an AHIP.
We're just an AHIP. It does actually kind of sound cute. AHIP. But so they have they're basically representatives from all of the major health insurance companies, all the folks that we talk about here every week, the United Healths of the world, the whatnot.
Cigna,
All right, but of course they see themselves as doing awesome things for people, right? And so this was on their website, and I just have to read it for you. They wrote about this is their vision. So this is their vision of themselves, and oddly they wrote it not in complete sentences, but sort of like a poem. So I'd like to read it as a poem, if you don't mind. AHIP. We are champions of care. Health insurance providers working together as one, making healthcare better and coverage more affordable for every American, listening and guiding the conversation on care. Period.
I love listening.
We are advancing mental and physical health. Period. Always improving how and where we help others. Period. Harnessing the power of our collective expertise, turning healthy insights into helpful innovations, all for the greater good, so everyone can thrive in good health together. That's what CARE does. AHIP, guiding greater health.
Wow. I perform your reading. Two images came to mind as I was listening to the AHIP poem. One was like every sentence was like one of those motivational posters that you put on the wall, like the cat hanging from the tree, it says hanging in there or something.
Yeah.
And the other one is like, this looks like a list of catchphrases they might have like focus grouped internally, but then they just decided to pick all of them together.
Yeah, just pick them all. Pick them all. Throw them all together. Yeah, it's beautiful. Anyway, I thought it was beautiful. That's what CARE does. AHIP.
Together.
So AHIP is like most like associations of evil corporations, AHIP's pretty evil. So it will not shock you that they've been writing their own public comment letters to CMS, advocating for expansions to the Medicare Advantage program and stuff. They have them on their website back to at least 2015, although we know that they've been advocating for this for quite some time. So what they started to do recently, which is really interesting, I think, is that they started coordinating their besties in the House and Senate to write letters on their behalf. This reminds me a little bit of when you're in middle school and you get your best friend to ask the guy you like if he likes you too.
Right.
And if the answer is yes, you meet by the bike racks at recess. But so they basically realized that health insurance companies are toxic. So we should get these legislators to write on our behalf and talk about why Medicare Advantage is so awesome. And their letters are basically what you would expect, right? Expand the program to more seniors. They always want more and more customers. They don't want to fix this problem with overpayment that Ben's going to be talking about in a minute. But basically Medicare Advantage plans are being overpaid. And then also these letters that AHIP writes, they present their own research with some like wild claims, right? So they're like, Medicare Advantage will bring more money into the Medicare system because Medicare Advantage plan holders use less care, which is it's just nothing to brag about,
but they use less care together, all for the greater good, so everyone can thrive in good health.
Guiding greater health.
Guiding greater health.
Which is like, I mean, like that's like being a grocery store and being like, yeah, our customers buy less food than they need.
Did you know that if you put lies in ryming meter form, it sounds very charming and non-threatening?
Yeah, it's really nice. So, and then the other thing that they always bring up, which you mentioned before, right, is they're like so proud that Medicare Advantage is serving a diverse population. So they mentioned in one of their recent things, their recent propaganda materials, as of 2021, approximately 59% of Hispanic or Latino or Latina individuals and 57% of Black individuals eligible for Medicare choose Medicare Advantage plans. Okay, overall, 54% of Medicare beneficiaries who belong to diverse populations choose Medicare Advantage. I love that, diverse populations. It's not code for anything. Yeah. But it's like, yeah, like, oh, like you, again, this is not something to brag about, right? Like if you actually set out to exploit the diverse demographics who are most marginalized in our society, you will.
Yes.
I mean, it's like yeah, like we're exploiting more people of color than
Right.
any other program.
Just imagine like what is it, the mortgage lenders who were giving out subprime mortgage lending to communities of color.
Right,
It's
right,
like,
right.
look how many folks were enrolling in these low income
That's
communities and diverse
amazing.
populations.
Now
Yes.
turn away while we screw them.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, so okay, so these letters, again, very much what you would expect, very much in keeping with the general Medicare Advantage rhetoric. But like I said, they coerce these different they don't coerce, and most of them really don't need to be coerced because they're
This is how they were
wimps.
elected. Right.
Yeah, right.
By getting corporate backing.
So yeah, so basically, like they have these letters, and in the some examples here in 2021, there was a rep letter. They do different letters for the House of Reps and the Senate. So their rep letter had 70 signers, and it was initiated by some representatives, by Val Demings in Florida, Mike Gallagher in Wisconsin, Mark Vesey in Texas, hello, and Gus Bilirakis, whose name I'm sure I'm mispronouncing. Apologies to all of our Greek listeners. But so those folks came together and led the charge on the letter in 2021. So in 2023, there was a Senate letter that had 60 signers. Very impressive for them. Good for them. And it's just like, I bring this one up just because it's such a good example of how this is like insidiously bipartisan.
Right. And to remind people, there's only 100 senators.
Right.
60 is a lot of them.
No, it's true. So like when you look at the signers for this letter, you see like John Fetterman is literally right next to Ted Cruz.
Right.
So yeah, so everyone.
Yeah. And the crazy thing about this letter, which, as you say, is ghost written by AHIP and that by the health insurance plans, and then is fake released as a Dear Colleague letter from senators to each other, is that it's basically like an open love letter to Medicare Advantage plans. It's like, we think that that the folks who run Medicare should just support Medicare Advantage in any way you possibly can. It's a great program. There's no concrete evidence about why it's good. There's no attempt. There's not a lot of footnotes I'm noticing in this particular letter. It's just like, this is great stuff. Keep it going. Privatize more.
Yeah.
So, and it's surprising. I think it says something about how much control corporations have over particular legislators, when legislators will literally just write like a blank check endorsement of your product, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's not like this particular thing is great. It's like you insurance company, you AHIP, you're great. I love you. So yeah. Oh, but actually, I should mention that in 2024, this letter writing campaign continued, but there was a difference. There was a little plot twist there. So in 2024, there were still 60 senators on the Senate letter, but only 16 representatives signed on to their version, the AHIP version. And that, I would argue, is because of the other letter, which Pramila Jayapal has been whipping up support for in the House. You want to tell them about the other letter?
Yes. So this is so the context of all this is that the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which is called CMS, this is the federal agency that runs Medicare. Each year they plan their regulations on Medicare Advantage plans for the next year. So right now we're in the thick of the fight over what they're going to do about Medicare Advantage in 2025. Are they going to make it easier for Medicare Advantage to advertise and rip people off, or are they going to start reining in some of the sort of price gouging, the profit making, and also the terrible insurance coverage they offer? There is now, and I should say that there's only in the last 2 to 3 years, I've been in healthcare now for 11 years, only in the last 2 to 3 years has there been kind of an organized resistance to Medicare Advantage, like an anti-privatization or a deprivatization movement, which is really exciting, actually. And so just a couple of weeks ago, there was a second letter in the battle of letters that was sent to Biden as well as CMS.
Hasn't been sent yet.
That's right. So it can still be signed on by your rep, which is why we're doing this today, calling on major reforms to the Medicare Advantage program and essentially pointing out that Medicare Advantage kind of sucks. So the letter, it was led by, as you said, Pramila Jayapal, who is one of our favorites because she's also the lead sponsor of the Medicare for All bill. But it is not actually just like Medicare for All people who are signing this letter. The other lead signers of the letter are Roseanne DeLauro and Jen Schakowsky. Schakowsky is a Medicare for All supporter, but is a little bit kind of middle of the road, I'd say, on our issue. And Rose DeLauro is not a supporter of Medicare for All. So there's I'd say, a broader spectrum of folks on this. There were 70 reps on that original AHIP letter, as you pointed out. We have 70 reps now in this anti-Medicare Advantage letter. But there are 435 voting members of Congress, and so this means the vast majority of reps are currently just kind of taking the cowardly way out and not taking a position on it. So there's a lot of organizing work to be done on this if we want to protect Medicare from being completely privatized. So I just thought I'd go through the letter has just 4 main points about what it's calling on the Biden administration basically to do to protect Medicare. And we are fully in support of this because we don't want to win Medicare for All and then have it be based on a Medicare that's been privatized and basically run by for-profit corporations. So this is like an important piece of the fight for Medicare for All. So the first demand that they make is that Medicare Advantage plans should be banned from creating prior authorization barriers to getting the care you need that can't be used in traditional Medicare. So, one of the ways that they keep those premiums down and make themselves more affordable is basically by creating all these hoops you have to jump through to get authorization for procedures, for example, or specialty care. And they'll deny a lot of those prior authorization requests. So that makes it much, much harder for you to get the care you need. Sometimes you can't get the care you need at all. But then of course they get to pocket some extra money.
Fantastic.
And I'll just point out one particular prior authorization thing that Medicare Advantage plans do that public Medicare does not, which is called step therapy.
Oh, I've done that.
And
the first step is admitting you have a problem, right? No.
No. The first step is getting fucked. And then, so basically it's, if there's 2 comparable prescription drugs or 2 comparable forms of treatment, you have to do the cheap one first, even if it's not what your doctor recommends, before you can use the more expensive one. So just think about the world of like antidepressant prescription drugs,
which I do.
Even though the antidepressants are very, very different across the spectrum of them, you could be required to try a cheaper one first, before being allowed to try a more expensive one, even if your doctor feels strongly that you should be skipping to the more expensive one for reason, based on evidence and your circumstances and all that. So anyway, step therapy was banned under the Obama administration. Then it was unbanned by Trump and allowed by Medicare Advantage plans. And Biden did not ban it again yet when he stepped into office. So this is what we're trying to get the Biden administration to do now, but also to not allow any other types of, that's just one type of prior authorization trick that they use to make you not be able to.
I just want to say that also, I think that like the prior authorization thing is one of the ways in which they turn out people who they don't want to deal with, right? Like the more care you need, the more you're going to need these prior authorizations, the more hassle that you get with these prior authorizations, the more delay there is in getting your care, the more frustrated your doctor and your medical providers are going to be. And then the end result, right, is that the less likely you are to get the care that you need. So Yeah.
Exactly. It's very similar to care denials, which Medicare Advantage plans also do a lot of, in that very few people appeal the claim
Yeah.
denials when their claim is denied, and I think it's similar with prior authorization in that when you're really sick, you're just usually not in a good position to advocate for yourself,
Yeah.
and to make a ton of phone calls. And like sometimes it can be really difficult, whether it's a mental health or a physical health
Mm-hmm.
issue. And unless you have like a bunch of people supporting you who are very competent at this, it's a moment when insurance companies can take advantage of you,
Mm-hmm.
and make life really hell. So that's number one, is to ban Medicare Advantage from doing any prior authorization that traditional Medicare does not do, which is most of them. And then second, and I love this one, the second demand is that Medicare Advantage plans should cover all providers who in their networks who are covered under traditional Medicare, which is most providers do cover are included in the when you join public
Yeah.
Medicare. There's no limited network. It's not like you can go to this hospital but you can't go to that hospital. You can go to all the hospitals and most of the doctors, the vast majority of doctors. This is another way that Medicare Advantage plans will kind of offer you fake
Mm-hmm.
coverage, is that they'll have an extreme limited network, especially for things like maybe dental care or vision or hearing. And you might not even be able to find a provider in your
Oh
area
yeah. Do you remember
who's
there
covered.
was one person who wrote into us when we were asking for Medicare Advantage stories from our supporters, who basically had to drive an hour over a mountain,
I remember
yeah,
this. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
order to access
Yep.
vision care. And
Yep.
that
Mhm.
reminds me of one of the other kind of patterns that we saw in those stories overall, which was that not only were people who were sicker more likely to have problems with the plans, but people who lived in areas where there are fewer medical providers tend to have a lot more problems, right? What?
Yeah. Yeah, in general, for everyone, obviously in rural areas, but
Mhm.
the Medicare Advantage plans really sometimes you don't even really have coverage because you can't find a provider in your area willing to take this Medicare
That's
Advantage
right.
plan. So this is another way that we could essentially level the playing field between public Medicare and the private Medicare systems and the Medicare Advantage plans, and stop letting them kind of take advantage of people or not provide real care in order to turn a profit. And then the last big piece that the letter highlights is to stop overpaying Medicare Advantage plans. You talked about this at the very beginning, how Medicare Advantage plans cost way, way more to cover the same person as
Mm-hmm.
public Medicare. And Medicare has kind of in a half-assed way tried to prevent them from over-billing taxpayers by adjusting the payments they give depending on how sick a
Mm.
person is. So they'll pay you less they'll pay a Medicare Advantage plan less for treating like a very healthy person, and pay them more for treating someone who, for example, has diabetes or has a chronic health
Mm-hmm.
condition or some form of disability. So naturally, Medicare Advantage has used this to try and make more money.
Sure.
And this is something we heard so many stories about when we asked for people's experience with Medicare Advantage plans. It's called upcoding,
Yeah.
where Medicare Advantage will on your medical records say that you have all these serious medical issues, which often you might not have at all, or you had briefly for a month and it went away for the rest of your
Mm-hmm.
life. But they will code you that way so that they can charge Medicare more
Yeah.
and basically bilk
Jesus
taxpayers.
Christ, they are so
So,
fucking smart. I hate how smart they are.
right. This is why we had this guy Peter Hyam, he was the commissioner of insurance in Massachusetts for like 20 years, and they under Dukakis and then some other governors, and he went through all these different phases where they tried to regulate health insurance companies in Massachusetts, like with rate setting, with all this other stuff. And he said at the end, they find a way to evade basically everything you do to try and
Yeah.
hold them accountable. So the only thing you can do is get rid of them. And he became a Medicare for All advocate later in his life. And that's from someone who he made his living trying to regulate health insurers. He's like,
Just
it
give
just
up.
can't be done.
Just give up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing
There
what
we
we're doing.
are.
I mean, and the last piece, and I think this is actually really important, Jillian, is the letter says from the savings you can generate by not overpaying Medicare Advantage plans anymore, we should use those savings to expand the Medicare program for everyone, whether you're in public or a private Medicare plan. You could save so much money by just not overpaying Medicare Advantage plans that you could basically cover full dental, vision, and hearing for everyone on Medicare and still have money left over. And you could use it for a lot of other things too, like eliminating those deductibles and premiums that are still left in Medicare. And
that's a dream. That's the dream, right? Is that we all actually cover these things in a public program like that treats you like a whole person.
Fancy that.
Imagine it. It's a dream.
And not everything but your face, mouth, and ears. So what is it? The luxury mouth bones?
Luxury mouth bones. Yeah, that's it.
Luxury mouth bones. Yeah, and and this is something we should highlight at Healthcare Now, that we don't advocate for just getting rid of Medicare Advantage plans just because they are the only affordable thing for so many people. We only advocate for getting rid of Medicare Advantage plans if at the same time we expand public Medicare to cover all those gaps, cover dental, vision, hearing. So that's the direction this letter is going in, which I was glad to see.
Absolutely. So, yeah. We want to stop the privatization, but we need to make the public utility better.
Right.
Excellent.
So, Jillian, what does it all mean? What are the what's your takeaway from like the battle of the letters?
Ben.
Witnessing right now.
I mean, I guess I think. Well, all right. So based on the numbers here, tell a story, right? Which I think is really important, right? So like just like highlighting what we've already said, but like the numbers of legislators who are signing on to these AHIP ghost-written letters by the insurance companies about how awesome they are. The number of the folks who are like falling for that and signing on to that is definitely going down over the years, right? I mean, just from I think 60 to 16 is pretty wild, right? But and the fact that we are actually gaining supporters in the House, I think, is something that's really important. I think it's a testimony to the fact that Pramila Jayapal has done so much incredibly good organizing around this with her colleagues. And that's something we don't really usually talk about, is how politicians organize each other. So it's kind of an interesting view. We also know that because the Biden administration actually responded last year, and they are going to be, do have plans in place to stop overpaying Medicare Advantage by as much, right? So we know that these letters are actually having some impact on policy, even if they aren't the be all.
Plus organizing and grassroots lobbying.
Absolutely.
Hopefully helps.
Yeah, totally. And so and I think that this becomes a show of power and a legislator where it is so gridlocked that it's actually difficult to put progressive policy up for a vote, right? Here you can kind of demonstrate power in numbers without taking the risk of losing on a floor vote, I think. Yeah. So here's the question though, Ben. All this is happening. What are we going to do about it?
Well, I feel like we end all of our episodes pretty much the same, which is take action, do something. And in this case, we are going to recommend that you call your representative at the link that we just put up. And you can get it in the show notes of our podcast if you're listening on the audio version, but it's healthcare-now.org/call your rep. Call-your-rep. We have a whole thing for how do you find your rep and reach their office. So the deadline for this particular sign-on letter is tomorrow, which is
Wednesday.
We're recording this on Tuesday, February 27th. So the deadline will be Wednesday, February 28th. Especially if you hear the audio version, it might have passed already the time deadline, but I would suggest calling your rep anyway. I guarantee you, even after they submit this letter to CMS, they would be happy to add names on afterwards. And I think your rep needs to hear about this issue any time of the year. So don't wait, even if a deadline has passed.
And because we know that this is an ongoing battle, we know that there will be a next letter, and it can't hurt to get them thinking about that early.
Yeah, and Jillian, I think we're going to have to wrap up this podcast soon because you are literally disappearing from the camera as we did.
Yeah, for anyone who's watching, the sun actually set during this podcast. So I started out with some natural light, and now it is pitch black, and I am sitting in the dark. Much like people who don't know about Medicare Advantage and what it's doing to our seniors.
Oh, well done. I thought the sun never set on Texas. Or was that the Roman Empire?
They're all the same thing. Texas is my Roman Empire. Anyway.
All right. Well, let us thank the podcast team, of course, as always. Our podcast manager, Angelique Davis, does an amazing job. Our show notes writer is Jerry Katz, and our audio editor for this episode was Christian Brandt. Thank you so much to you all. Do not forget to like this episode, subscribe to the Medicare for All podcast on whatever platform you use. And attribution, this show is a project of the Healthcare Now Education Fund. So if you want to support our work, you can donate at our website, healthcare-now.org. And you can call your rep while you're
Call your rep.
Donate, call your All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you in a couple
weeks.
Stay
Stay dangerous.